Hello everyone! Happy Tuesday! I am so happy to see you all here. I hope everyone is doing well. Welcome to Much Ado About Gaming. I am, of course, Jessa Blackthorne here with my penguin pal Noodles, and we are so excited to have this show for you today. Today's really cool, actually. I'm really excited for today's show. It's a lot of fun, and I'm really excited. Today, we have for you, and please let me know if everyone can't hear me or if something's going on. I'm having some weird technical issues with my computer right now, so I don't want to mess with anything, but if you can't hear me, just let me know. Appreciate it. But today's really cool. Today, I am going to be showing you all an interview that I did with the designer of one of our upcoming games, and I'm going to be talking about that game a little bit. And yay, I'm glad everyone can hear me. Thank you so much for letting me know, Brian and Adam. I really appreciate it. But yeah, so before we dive into the interview, let's talk a little bit about the game that we are featuring today, and that game is Grease Lightning. You can optionally sing the song in your head. I cannot sing it out loud for copyright reasons, but I'm certainly singing it in my head. And I am very excited to talk about this game, which has nothing to do with musicals or cars, but is still a great, fantastic game with a brilliant title. And you're going to hear more about that in the interview. But let me tell you all a little bit about the game before we get into that. In Grease Lightning, players race around a circular track, and you're trying to be the first to complete 2 laps. So you roll your dice to move around the track and move your boat, and you can risk going faster by rolling a 3rd die, but if with your 3rd die you roll lower than what you rolled with your 2nd die, you lose both the 2nd die and the 3rd die, and you can only keep the number that you rolled with your 1st die. Another thing that's really cool about the game is as you play, the seas will shift and transform, and the board, as you can kind of see in some of these pictures, these are all renders. You pick up racecourse wedges that you can place anywhere in the circle, except on top of the ships or at the start of the board. And you can use these to actually make your path easier, or maybe you want to place a Hydra directly in your opponent's way. You'll also get Favor of the Gods cards, granting you powerful abilities, and they're all flavored with the different gods. You can see that right here on screen right now. You're also going to hear a lot about that from Kathleen Mercury, who is one of the designers, and she's going to be talking about that, the background behind that in the interview, and it's really cool and really interesting, so I'm excited to show that to all of you. But you speed through the course to win the favors of the gods, traverse the whirlpools of fate, collect fish to feed the Hydra, and after 2 laps around the whirlpool, whoever sailed the furthest wins the game. It is such a cute game. We don't have physical copies of it yet, so I do not have a copy to show you yet. I know normally I have a copy of the game that I can pick up and show you and unbox. I don't have that today, but that just means we're going to get another video of Grease Lightning down the line where I unbox it for you, and that's going to be really exciting and fun. But for now, we are going to chat with Kathleen Mercury, who is, like I said, one of the designers of the game. Just a little bit more quick information before I get into that. Grease Lightning plays 2 to 5 players, ages 12 and up. It plays in 45 minutes, and it is a $34.99 price point. So it's a great price point. It has a lot of beautiful artwork, as you can see. The concept is really amazing. The board is really, really cool, and the game will be hitting your friendly local game store and online in June, so next month. So if you haven't pre-ordered it yet, definitely do that now, get on that so that you can make sure you get your copy when it releases. But yeah, so that's kind of a summary of the game. We'll definitely have another episode where we will unbox it, but for now I'm gonna click you into my interview with Kathleen. This is pre-recorded, so I'm not gonna be able to answer your questions live verbally, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna jump into the chat, and while I'm in the chat, if you have any questions that don't seem to be clear, or you're curious about something, type it. I will answer you in the chat, and I hope that you enjoy my interview with Kathleen. Thanks, guys. I am so excited because I am here with Kathleen Mercury, one of the designers of Grease Lightning, which, of course, we've talked about it on the show before, and I'm so excited for it to come out for a lot of reasons. Kathleen, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited.
And we're so excited to have you. So I guess we'll just jump right into some of the questions. Where did you get the idea for Grease Lightning? Where did it come from?
So it's a co-design with myself and my former partner, Mark Selmeyer, and we're still great friends, modern times, it's fine. And he actually had designed it as a little micro game that was a race game where you had diverging paths, but there was linear cards. And so when you put down a card, and I didn't like it, I was like, no, I want it to be like a fun, fast race. I don't want to stop and get gems or do any of these things. And so we were on our way actually out to his parents' house, and we were talking about the game. I said, no, it needs to be like a fun, crass race game. Like it needs to be a circle. It needs this and this and this. And he immediately just started sketching. And from there, the shape of the game changed. And that's when I came in on the project as co-designer. And so it just came from an argument, I guess. But I think it worked out pretty well. It's pretty amazing, honestly, the system that he created, because I could come up with ideas, but he could immediately like visualize how to make them. And as a graphic designer, he could make them look really well and really functional. And so, yeah, it worked out really well.
That's honestly pretty cool. Like, you just, it's incredible that something so great came out of, no, I hate this game.
Well, and I think that's something that was like one of the best and honestly one of the most frustrating parts with this sometimes, because we're so different, so that when one of us had an idea, like you really had to push for it to happen. And Mark thinks very much in mechanical terms, and he can make so many different crazy systems work. He loves some of the most brain burnery sorts of, visual puzzle games. And I love a visual puzzle too, but I'm definitely more attuned to like player experience and is this actually fun? Not this is cool that it does this thing, but does it have the intended effect? And so between that sort of like push-pull between us, we were able to get the game where like mechanically, like it was doing what we needed to do to provide the player experience that we wanted to have. And I think that sort of like friction and tension and all that helped us to really push the game forward in a way we were happy with. So it worked out.
That's so cool. So, you kind of touched on this just now, but could you go into even a little bit more detail about what your design process was like working together, or just in general?
Sure. Well, the game itself, we knew what we wanted. The idea was we wanted to sort of capture the feel of sort of like a Mario Kart kind of game, where as players raced around, there could be various obstacles where some could be helpful, some could be not. And so that was sort of the trick in terms of how do you capture that experience in a game? How do you have that sort of like dynamic, moving, changing sort of environment so that, players don't just like, like in a bad platformer, you knew exactly when everything would happen. Playing Pitfall as a kid, right? Like I knew exactly how to time what I was doing. And so it was really when we were looking at the wedges and how we designed those to create all different types of experiences. Like some have a lot more, of the negative sort of obstacles, the more dangerous things. Others have a lot more of like the positive or things like favors of the gods that, could give you a benefit. And so we're really trying to put all that together in a way that collectively there was a pretty balanced experience, but also with enough variability where you could just create those sort of like heroic moments where you realize like, oh my gosh, wait a minute, I can do this thing like bang, 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 bang. Right. But also those moments where, there's like a problem and you've got to figure out like how you're going to get yourself out of it. And so really looking at lanes and distribution of icons and, especially when you're getting into like the spreadsheety side of games, still, even with that, was still always coming back to like, what is the experience that I want players to have with this?
That's a really cool philosophy because, you can kind of, I feel like sometimes designers get so caught up in the mechanics and in the, the gameplay that like stepping back and saying, okay, but what is my audience experiencing? I think that's a really great approach, and that's really smart.
Yeah. Well, and my favorite games are like my favorite game from a design standpoint is Survive Escape from Atlantis because it so perfectly marries, the mechanics marry so well with what you expect. The island is sinking, so every turn pieces are taken off the board. You've got more than what you can possibly do in the time allotted for the game, so you have to make some hard decisions in terms of like which pieces you're trying to save and which not. And then there's other things that make sense too, like whales smash boats but not people, sharks eat people but not boats, and sea monsters destroy everything. So really trying to have that same sort of like intuition in terms of like what would cause this thing to actually happen in the game, not just because I can put it in a game, but it's like whenever there's anything that's in a game that's like, I understand why they did that to like push the game as an engine forward, but it literally makes no sense to me. And I wanted the game to be intuitive, because the more that players can just like jump into the game, understand it, even if setting it up and looking at the game and having a very quick like, okay, I think I can understand what this is. That's what we wanted for the game, so that families could play it easily and quickly. Gamers could use it as, a little game in between maybe some other bigger, heavier games. But we just wanted to have it where the game felt and delivered like either I wanted people to feel like they're racing a ship through monster infested waters in Greece. Like, of course I would, that was the idea.
So creating immersive, realistic, logical stakes in the game.
Yeah, but like in a fun way, like a fun, lighthearted way, like you've got choices, they're fun choices, they're not meant to take too long, like even for movement, wanting a press your luck kind of system so that players could have some risk in terms of like how much they're, trying to go faster and faster. But, so sometimes you might actually get like a really big roll, and then sometimes you might not. But we also put in a lot of ways for players to balance and ameliorate that, so that if somebody got a really bad roll, you had some resources and some options to then try to optimize what you could do with that. So we never wanted to, like with any game with dice, you might have something that's real bad happen, and you might have something that's like pure magic happen, but that's part of the fun too, especially if you're talking about, if you're racing in monster infested seas in ancient Greece, bad stuff might happen, or the gods might smile upon you, and there you are.
I love that. That's awesome.
Thanks.
So you have a background as a teacher. Can you kind of tell us how do you feel like your teaching background impacted the way that you approach the design process? I know that in the rule book, you thanked the students at your middle school. Did you test with them?
Oh, yes. And actually, I teach game design, and I've been doing that for about 13, 14 years. And in fact, if anybody wants my game design teaching resources for yourself, or for anyone who might be wanting to teach game design from Girl Scouts to college to Norway's War College, they use my resources. That's at KathleenMercury.com. Awesome. So I've been teaching game design for so long, and so I've been doing it too, because I'm not going to have my students do something that I'm not willing to do myself. I think you get a lot of empathy for your students with that, and I definitely have play tested my games with them. And in fact, when we do play testing in the classroom, the first game that they play test is mine, so they can see what play testing is. They can see how I get feedback. They can see how I give feedback, and so it's really an instructive part. Plus, playtesting with kids, especially middle school kids, is amazing. They don't have the adult filters that we have in terms of like, component cost or market saturation or any of that other stuff that, with them, it's the moment when someone says, oh, what would be cool? And I'm like, go on, because, they just have this like unfiltered sort of approach to what they want the game to be and what they want the game to be fun. And that's, I think, so important, and one of the best things that they can give. And in my games, I have like a specific student is actually credited for Grease Lightning, because I had a problem I was like kicking at for like 6 months, a year, and I just couldn't figure out the best way to solve it. Like I had an okay solution. And the student was like, well, couldn't you just do blah, blah, blah? And it was so simple, like so elegant. And I was like, that's going to work. That's going to work. Because I'd play test the game so many times, and it sure did. It totally, so he's actually thanked in there by name because he really did solve the game well, and solve a problem in the game, not just like give me an idea. So
Right.
absolutely, play testing with my students has completely, I mean, I design games that they want to play, because if I design something that they wouldn't want to play or couldn't play, well, then I can't play test. Plus it's fun play testing my own games with them, and it's fun for them to see my games like this is a real thing. This isn't just like schoolwork or whatever. We make real games in the class, and so that's super fun.
That sounds amazing. I mean, you know, especially like you said, bringing it into the students and like taking their feedback. And, you know, because I feel like, at least me growing up, a lot of teachers were like, they dismiss their students' opinions because, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, you're just a student. But the fact that you know, you heard your student out when they made that suggestion and you were like, yeah, this could work. Like, I really, you know, as a former student, as we all are, I guess, I really appreciate that. And
yeah, well, I mean, I can't.
Ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Go ahead.
Well, you know, I'm my biggest interest in for them is what ideas they have and what comes out of them. You know, I'm a gifted teacher, so we do a lot of creative problem solving and a lot of collaboration work. And so game design fits in really well with that. But for me, I don't care what other people say. I want them to tell me what they think. So they don't do like research reports in terms of this person's invention or that. I have them do the inventing. I have them making movies. I have them doing cosplay. I have them doing board game design, because it doesn't matter what anyone else has done. I mean, if you need to do some research to inform what you're doing, that's great. But what is your idea? And I think especially with game design, one of the hardest things, as anyone who's designed games know, is there isn't a right answer. You just have to pick something and go with it and test it and hopefully get to a point where the game works and does what you want it to do. Right. And I think the best way for them to see that is for me to model that, because it's a really scary process for kids. It's a really scary process for adult designers too. When you're embarking on, you're like, this is something that I want to do. This is something I want to see to the end. I mean, because Grease Lightning took place, I mean, there were various reasons why, but you know, I think we started working on that game almost 10 years ago, 9 years ago. Yeah, it's been a long time, you know, and because there have been times where it's been dormant, where we haven't worked on it, or, you know, it's just been in various stages of design development, all that. And so, you know, having them see that this is a process that works, but it's not a quick one. It's not an easy one. And that's something that's important for them to see, because I want them to be creators, not just consumers. And they just have to know sometimes to make the cool thing, you have to be willing to put in the work and the time.
That's fantastic. So I wanted to ask about the theme. Now, I'm a theater person. I have a BFA in musical theater. The show is called Much Ado About Gaming for a reason. I'm a theater person, and of course I love the title and the whole theme as it goes with the title. I love how silly and unexpected it is, but how brilliantly clever it is. Can you talk about what that was like and the theme part?
Well, yeah, so we had it as a space theme for the longest time, because with science fiction, you can come up with rules for anything. Aliens can do anything, right? So then you didn't have to really to worry too hard about, you know, a portal that drops you to a different part of the board or something like that, because you're like, yeah, it's space. But it's actually Zev. After because Zev has liked this game for years, ever since he was back at Z-Man. And so when we had the game ready and available to show him, and so when we finally designed to sign it, he was actually the one that said, what if it was a Hydra? Because it used to have a black hole in the middle. But as the game changed, you didn't actually get sucked into the black hole anymore. You just kind of danced around it, and sort of a wasted theme. It didn't totally make sense. But especially once we came up with the idea for ancient Greece, like all these different like kind of issues with the game sort of opened up. One of the things with the Hydra is, you know, when you're racing around, a Hydra head could appear at any part on the board. In the black hole, like the danger would have to stay in the middle. So then that made it a lot more dynamic in terms of how we use that gaming space to present various obstacles. And the gods were really fun, because we had various, you know, things that could happen. And one of my sisters is a huge Greek mythology fan. And so I called her up and I said, Karen, we're retheming this game from space to Greece. So here's all the different abilities. Help me figure out the gods that could go along with all these various abilities. And if you have any other abilities, let me know. And so she's like, and her response was so funny. She's like, I was born for this. And so she came up with all kinds of powers and abilities, like gods I've never heard of, and that was really fun. One of my favorite ones that got ixnayed in the development process was Hestia. And Hestia's card just basically said, she's sitting by the hearth. She likes you. And that was it. There was no active, there's no positive thing. There was no negative thing. It was just like, she likes you. And that got nixed. So the Hestia card was something else. But I just think like that'd be kind of funny as a promo card.
Right.
Where like as a promo card, it doesn't do anything. It's just like another card in the deck. Like, I think that's funny. I don't know that many other people would think that's funny. I don't know that gamers would really understand that, but it makes me laugh to think about it. But yeah, I do. Thank you. I do too. Yeah. So that's the thing, especially, like gods and monsters and, just like great epic heroic quests. I teach, we've done a big unit with my students when they're in 6th grade on the hero's journey and, talk about, Odysseus and everything. And so this like dovetails very well into that. So the theme was actually really, really fun because it just opened up so many more possibilities and that really actually helped push the game to like its final state. So it was good job, Zev, credit where credit's due.
Did he come up with the title or did you?
So that was actually one that came up with playtesting development internally at WizKids, because we had come up with various titles, but the Greek theme was relatively new. And I mean, I think at one point it was probably like Greek race game, something really like amazing. But I love puns. I love wordplay. And so when someone else, I can't take credit for it, but when someone else came up with the term Grease lightning, I was like, done. Done.
Absolutely brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. And it's like the cherry on top of such a good game.
Yeah. It's super fun. And in fact, I was talking with people about the game the other day. And so I was talking about this and the gods. I was like, wait a minute, Greece like the country. I was like, yeah, they're like, oh my God. They're like, they just had that moment where they got it. It was so fun. Yeah.
So you mentioned that, a lot of the abilities are pulled from the actual mythology of the gods. Do you think that this is a kind of game that like could make teaching about the Greek gods fun for kids?
Oh, I think so. I think so, especially because, kids love the Percy Jackson series. Like kids have a lot of exposure to myths and mythology. And I think especially, and that was one thing that I found definitely with the kids that I had, for the kids who are really into mythology, they love that aspect and they loved coming up with new ideas. The fun thing about working with kids is they can be draconian. And so there are times I was like, woo, so you're saying the player loses everything and loses a whole lap and this, like that is a lot. And so we're probably going to temper that, but no, but they had a lot of fun with that too, as far as like coming up with different ideas and trying out different god abilities and what was good and what wasn't good. And I think that's really great with, like I said, I mean, obviously I'm really passionate about designing games with my students, but they, it's not a thing where, designing is like, I put it down in front of them and, celebrate it with me. Like, they're really good at like digging in with me and figuring out these problems. So it's a ton of fun.
Awesome. So you mentioned that Zev liked the game even back when he was at Z-Man before he came and joined us at WizKids. So did he then approach you to sign the game, or did you kind of do a formal pitch for WizKids, or what was that like? What was that process?
Well, so we had actually signed the game to a different game company, and so that pushed the game in. So he saw one version, and then that pushed it into a different direction in terms of what the company was wanting. But then that company had some issues, and so we were able, luckily, to get the rights back. And the funny thing was that year where we didn't have the game, when I put it on the table and started playtesting, it was like, why did we do this? Well, I mean, there was definitely some things that were good, obviously, but there were some things like, no, this needs to be changed. This is a problem, And so it was really nice actually having that year, because it gives you some breathing space mentally to like take a break from it and to sort of see it with fresh eyes all over again. So then it like made a huge, big leap forward in terms of really seeing problems that we really hadn't noticed before to like, address them. And so I go to a lot of game conventions, especially being a teacher, having my summers off. And so I've known Zev for years. he's done some like, work when I was with Geekway to the West, helping out with that convention in St. Louis, as far as when he was a special guest. And we've had him with like game design contests that I've run and everything. So I've known Zeph for years. And like I said, he's liked the game. So I show it to him and we play it. And then basically I'd always come back with like a page of notes, and then show it to him and show it to him. And then finally got to the point where he was like, yes. And so, yeah, it was good. Like he's always loved the game. He's always believed in it. He's always thought it was fun. So and for me as a designer, because it's like the first big project for me to go from, I've got 2 other games that are signed, but this is my first one that's going to be coming out. And I consider it my high watermark as a game designer, because as I've gotten better at this, I've gotten better at, figuring out what the game needs to be and how it needs to get there.
So I guess stepping away from it gave you a lot of room for perspective when you came back to it.
Yeah, in fact, and that's one thing for me too, especially being a teacher, that's my first love. And so I design games on the side when I've got the mental capacity bandwidth to do so. So I don't work on games all the time. And so I like having that kind of sit in the back, kind of let it cook for a while sort of thing when I revisit it. And so a year was a lot, but it was apparently a beneficial year in terms of where we ended up being.
Yeah. So what was your biggest surprise during the design and development process of the game, would you say?
It's just like every time we would go deep, like I'd have to go deeper, there's just that you could always just keep tunneling down. And one of the things that I found that I really liked was balancing it a lot more than I thought I would, because especially when we would just like design these wedges with all kinds of crazy things just to see how they would play, how people would react to them. But once we sort of got down to like that core, I really enjoyed working on the game to get it to that place of polish, that place where once you start play testing it and play testing it, like it was really holding it together. So a lot more like development, honestly, than just initial design. Here's my big idea. So I really enjoyed that aspect. Plus too, as far as, like we said, like working the new theme on top of it and seeing how well the game held with that theme, but also the different possibilities for it. It all worked out pretty well.
That's really cool that, I feel like you hear a lot of game designers going, oh, the balancing is the worst part, but to say that you really enjoyed that is really cool.
Well, I think it's critical in a game like this because you have a lot of variability. You have you've got the with the dice in terms of how much players can move. And then you also have the wedges and how people can play them down. And we had in original versions, we had some wedges that when we did playtesting, we realized that it would basically create like an impassable pathway that went nowhere, like the big giant flaws. Well, we can't have that happen, so in terms of making everything work really well, so there's variability, there's excitement, there's that kind of surprise that we can put in there, but also in a way that it's still functional. And I think that's I always like, give me an interesting problem. Like I just always want to have like a problem to solve, and how can you take all of that. And I'm not a mathematician necessarily. Like I think in pictures, not necessarily in numbers, right? So, to sort of look at what does it need to be, again, like how do I need to get it there? I really enjoyed that aspect of it a lot more than I thought I would.
Great. So what, if you had to pick like one aspect of the game that's like, this is my favorite part, it's the best part, what aspect would that be?
Well, one of my favorite things was, so I was showing some games of mine, some prototypes to a well-known designer who's become a friend. And I said, well, this game is signed, but I want you to see what we're doing. And so I put down in the wedges and he looked at me and he's like, he said a bad word, not the baddest of the bad, but he said a bad word. And he's like, you solved a problem that we've been struggling, he and his design partner, that we've been struggling with for a long time. And it's the way that the wedges work, as far as that you can put them down and it changes the board, but it never becomes like a broken flow. You always can keep moving around the board. And having that sort of interchangeability and the way that the system works. I mean, that's credit where credit's due. That's Mark, because I could describe like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if a wedge did something like this? And then he would bang it out, so, but having somebody recognize the innovation of the wedges, how they work, how they make the game flow. That was a cool moment, because especially when it's one thing to, just when you've got a peer in the industry that recognizes work that you do as something good and interesting and different and innovative, that felt really good.
I can imagine that's really fantastic. So of course we've talked about how you teach game design. What is your number one tip for aspiring game designers?
Well, for aspiring game designers, there's so many things about the process that I love that I could talk about, but one of the most important things is when you're play testing, be quiet. Listen, write down what people say, pay attention to their body language, and encourage people to talk, because as soon as you start to argue or defend anything that you're doing, people will clam up, and it just closes off that pipeline of ideas. And I would rather hear 99 that I don't want, and the hope that there's that one or two, one idea that I think actually might work. And it's really hard for a lot of new designers to hear 99 ideas that don't work, or 99 things that people don't like. But the reality is that's true. If I have a game with problems and people don't tell me, I don't know that I need to fix them. So you have to separate yourself personally from the work that you're doing, so that and that's one thing too, especially being a woman. Sometimes if I'm playtesting with mostly men or all men, to say, you will not hurt my feelings. If the game has problems, I won't know unless you tell me. And it kind of like couch this in this sort of like, to set their expectations for what I'm looking for. And then once we do that, then it's like, they'll tell me everything and anything. So I think understanding that playtesters, people want good games, they're on your side. So just be open to whatever ideas you get in feedback. Don't take it personally, make the game better.
I think that's a spectacular tip. A lot of people do get it's a very personal process. It's your baby. You want it to be amazing. You want everyone to love it. But, I feel like it's hard sometimes to take critiques because it feels like they're attacking you. And so being able to step back is, I agree, a really important thing for a designer to be able to do.
Right. I just had a playtest for a game of mine a few months ago, and I thought the game was close to finished. And then somebody played it in a way that was in accordance to the rules and not what I expected, and the game did not work. And there was that moment of like, I thought we were done. But on the other hand, I'm so glad, because if I thought it was done and then I sold it to somebody and they realized, there's this big problem, I'd like to think we could fix it. I'd rather fix it before we get to contract stage,
It's easier to fix it now than it is to fix it later.
Right, especially when you're on schedules and you've got print runs scheduled and art's being done and all that. That's not the time you want to be fixing anything. So playtest. Listen to your playtesters and put your ego off to the side. You're still great. You made a game. So many people don't. Right. That's okay. But you made something, you put it out there. Be proud of that. And it's okay that it's a mess.
So that is my last question about Grease Lightning. But now I have another question.
Sure.
So I looked you up, and I found a video of Rodney interviewing you.
Oh, right. Yeah.
You were a champion at Geekway to the West. Can you talk about that? I just think it's really fun and interesting.
Oh, yeah. No, it's great. So at Geekway to the West, they do a Battling Tops tournament. So it's like that old style kind of like precursor to Beyblades. Right. You get little tops smashing into each other. And, it's a 64-person tournament. One might argue that there's probably more luck in the game than skill, obviously, yes. But I won. And at Geekway, when you win this giant, ridiculous wrestling belt. Well, the best part is one of my great friends in gaming, Scott Reed. Hi, Scott. He loves being mentioned. He was the one I beat in the final, and he wanted it so badly, and I won. And he was so mad. So actually what I did with the belt was all summer long, because I go to a lot of game conventions and I travel a lot. All summer long, I would take and post pictures and tag him every single day with myself and that belt. So with me with the Coast Guard in Washington,
Mm-hmm.
D.C., in the Library of Congress, in Utah, like everywhere and anywhere that I went
That's
with all
fantastic.
these different designers and everything. I mean, I bought a special suitcase so I could take the belt to Iceland. So there are pictures of me with that belt in Iceland.
That's incredible.
Tagging Scott. So that was one of the best things, was when I was talking with some of my friends at BGG who'd seen the belt. I had pictures of them with the belt, and they're like, hey, we've got some time. Go on with Rodney right now. I'm like, I'm on it. So there's me with the ridiculous belt talking to Rodney. It was pretty great.
That's awesome. That's hilarious. I applaud you, because that's fantastic.
Yeah, Scott's still mad about it too. So, hey, Scott, I won. Well, the funny part was, so at BGG Con, I showed up with my belt and I had a crown and a cape and all this ridiculousness, right? And then in the end, for that one, I made it to the finals. So I almost won BGGs as well. There's a lot of luck here. I mean, obviously, highly skilled. Like, there's a lot of luck. I almost won BGGs. But the best part is I was in the finals with 3 mimes. Who played totally silently. It was hilarious. Yes, I lost to 3 mimes, but the nice part was, it was because I was like the out of towner, I could play the heel. I could be the jerk. I could be like, oh, man, I'm gonna beat you, whatever. And the mimes were like, ooh. It was like surreal. So funny though. Oh my gosh, it was great. Yeah, I had so much fun with that.
That's great. I mean, all tops tournaments should be like that.
Right, because I won and Scott didn't. He is a very good friend and a forgiving one, so it's okay. But I also took a picture. He lives in Kansas somewhere, and I took a picture of myself in the belt on his front porch.
Did you not tell him you were there, or did you like?
No.
That's great. I love it.
Like he saw that posted like that night, because I was actually on my way out to that was Utah for the Tabletop Network. I was going out there for their game designer conference, and he doesn't live too terribly far off the interstate. So yeah, I just did a quick little stop and pop, little detour in front of on his house, invading his special space. It's good.
I mean, it's the only time he'll get to bring the belt home, I guess.
Oh,
was that too mean?
No. Oh, that is a cold martini. Well done. Delicious. Oh, so fun. I'm gonna use that with him.
Go for it. It's all yours.
Yeah.
So my very last question, and I ask this of all my designers who I bring on the show.
Sure.
Other than your game, what is your favorite WizKids game?
Oh gosh. There are a lot of them. I will say that I'm good friends with JB Howell, Mike Mihielsick, and I love Flotilla.
Oh, I love
it's
Flotilla.
It's a big, heavy game, really innovative system, where basically just like the whole game sort of flips mid-turn in terms of what you're doing and how you're doing it. A lot of really innovative ideas going on in that game. And I just think it's such an amazing piece of work. I tend to focus on, games in that, 45-minute sort of range. Yeah. And so when you play a game that's so well designed, that really provides a big gaming experience with lots of interesting choices and avenues. Yeah, Flotilla is certainly, like, I was so impressed by it and so proud of my friends because it's really good.
That's wonderful. And I love seeing designers supporting other designers.
Oh, I 100%. Oh yeah, no, I definitely have had so much support from so many designers along the way, and playtesting games. I will say the game design community has been amazing for me, and so I am more than happy always and ever. If somebody is interested in doing game design and you've got questions, reach out to me. I'm happy to answer any and all of them.
Thank you. And of course, I will have a link to Kathleen's website in the description of this video. So if you are interested in reaching out to Kathleen and asking her questions or checking out her courses, please check out down there. And I'm sure she'll be happy to help you.
Right. And everything on my website is free, and I make no money from it. It is purely a pay it forward labor of love so that other people can do this too. Absolutely incredible. Kathleen, thank you so much for talking to me today. You're so welcome. Thank you. I'm so excited for the release of Grease Lightning. It will be hitting friendly local game stores and online in June 2021. So keep an eye out, everyone. Pick it up, pre-order it if you haven't already. And I hope that everyone has a great week. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. Goodbye. Bye.